Good morning again from Square One Media. We are here doing another episode with A Courageous Heart, and I'm welcoming a really good friend of mine into the studio today. Her name is Joanne Kitchenese. She is from Ontario, but she has been raised here in Winnipeg. And so she has an amazing story that she is going to share with us today about her journey, not only to meet the Lord, but her journey in life. And I'm really honored to bring this story to you and to welcome Joanne. So, hi, Joanne.
Hello, Virginia.
It's just really nice to be able to sit down and have a conversation like this and bring your story to a setting where you can share it with other people, because I think knowing you personally, I've had so many of those times when I'm just saying, wow, how did she do this? And what an incredible experience for a young woman to go through. And I remember when I met again with you, I think we connected in the mall and you came walking across the room, and I just kept thinking, she has such joy and such peace and such light in her life for, coming through what she's come through. So I'm glad you can be here today and share that with people.
I'm glad to come and share. I'm glad to come and share with you. I'm excited about to share, to talk about what the Lord did and how, what He is doing, what He's continuing to do. So I'm really, really happy to do that.
So I've always been amazed with your story of, I guess, at the beginning. And the beginning for you was kind of at, I guess, the end of a relationship for your parents and those types of things in your younger life. So maybe you want to share with us.
The beginning is, I never really had a relationship with my parents. From what I remember of my home life, it was, we moved around a lot. The only consistent person that was there was my dad, and my mom was an alcoholic, and I also remember Sunday school, my mom playing gospel music in the morning, and her sending us to Bible camp and to Sunday school. And they talked about Jesus and church and Christianity and stuff, but I never really, it wasn't personal for me. And I found out later that I was born in Winnipeg, but I didn't go home with my parents. I went home with my aunt in Poplar Hill, and I was raised by her for a few months, and then I was taken home to visit, and my brothers didn't want to let me go, so my aunt said that it broke her heart to leave me there, but they wanted me to stay, so she didn't want to split us apart again, so she left me, and yeah, that's all I remember. We moved from Red Lake to Balmertown, Cochiner, wherever my dad would find work, and it was, I remember being safe and being happy, and I remember making up songs in the back of the van. Like, we had this big, huge blue van because there was me and my older brothers. I had 3 siblings, there used to be 4. And actually there was 5 of us. I barely remember my sister, but she had passed away. And I didn't find out that she was murdered it wasn't until December that I found out the actual story of what happened to her. I always wanted to ask, but in our family, we don't talk about stuff like that. Nobody wants to tell us the stories. Nobody wants to talk about what happened in the past, because, I don't know, it's just, you're not allowed to talk about stuff. It's I don't know, it's just not not what you do. So, yeah. So yeah, that I was that little kid who used to make up songs, and I used to go for rides with my dad up the North Road to pick up, I don't know, go visit these old ladies up there. And I remember sitting in the back seat just watching the tree line, and yeah, and I would make up songs and I would sing whatever, and I was just happy. I knew I was safe, and I knew I was happy when I was with my dad. And I always remembered that time. But my dad was like really quiet. Like he never really said I love you or anything like that. And so, yeah. And my brothers and sisters, my brothers and sister, from what my other brother told me, is that they used to try to protect me from the stuff that was going on in our house. There was a lot of violence, a lot of drinking, and just anger, explosive anger. You never knew when somebody was going to get mad. You never knew when you were going to have to run and hide. And that was, and the way my brother described it was like he never knew what was going to happen. And for the most part, they tried to protect me from that, and they tried to, I don't know, just keep me away from that. I remember my brother Paul carrying me. He put me over his shoulder, and we ran down this path all the way to my grandfather's, and it must have been a good like 10, 15-minute walk. And I remember him breathing really hard because he was like, I think he was just running on pure adrenaline. And I remember looking at the lake, and the trail that we took went by this lake, away from the highway, and he took me to my grandparents. I don't know how many days I spent there, but they kept me there till it was safe to go home.
So you were the youngest.
He was the oldest. They were the one, and I was the youngest. So they had to, yeah. It was always like that though. I just didn't. I don't know. When I think about it now, like it's just, I don't know.
What years were those? Were those like the 70s or
I was born in 79, so it must have been early 80s.
Early 80s.
Yeah. I remember we lived in just outside of Red Lake up until 85, 86. It took a long time for me to start remembering days and years, like, because I had to really look back and, yeah. And the reason why I started looking back is because I was trying to remember why I was the way I was, and I remember praying and asking God to heal me, and I knew the only way to heal was to look back at all that stuff and to face everything. And one of the hardest things that I faced was being molested by two cousins. That was in Red Lake, and I think that was hard. It still impacts me today. I still get anxious sometimes. I don't even know why, but it's not as bad as it used to be. Like I started therapy and stuff, and but I was molested, and then and when we moved to Mishkegogmang in Oz, where I spent I think we moved there when I was like around 7, and I spent my teenage years there till I was like 16. And we lived in this house, all of us. Like, it was a 3-bedroom house, and yeah, my grandparents lived in a little trailer behind our house, and I used to go visit them, and it was always warm in there, and they always had food and candies. But yeah, I used to like going there. And then eventually my dad, they built this house, a bigger house for us, and he moved us in there, and everything seemed okay. And I don't know, I had friends, and my cousin Maxine who lived next door, and she was like my best friend. She still is. So yeah, and Yeah, my mom kept drinking, and when she would drink, she would take off for days. Like, I wouldn't see her, and sometimes they would leave me with my aunt or whoever, like, whoever would take me, I guess. In Red Lake, it was my aunt, Augustine. I'd stay there for days, and I remember being so lonely, like waiting for my family to come and get me, and that's where I was molested too. So, yeah, and it's kind of, I don't know. I didn't really take a look at it till later on. I realized
So
it.
when you say you were anxious, is that like actual anxiety attacks? Is that
Um,
actual like?
it's not as, the worst one was like a heart attack, kind of anxious, like really, like I had to go to the emergency room thinking, because it felt like a heart attack. That's the kind of, it's like your whole body tenses up, and you realize your breathing is not. Yeah, it's you're holding your breath. Your shoulders are clenched and everything. That's what it feels like. And
So
then,
that was kind of your body's way of signaling,
yeah,
hey, we have to do some
yeah, we
healing.
need
We have
to,
to
yeah,
look
chill.
at this now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I didn't realize what those were till I got to after I had the kids. I had the worst one ever, and I don't know. I don't know. I thought it was just normal for me. That was my normal. I didn't know that's not how your body is supposed to react to things, and so I started. Yeah, it's different now. I learned breathing techniques and stuff, and
I think that's so important for people out there to understand that there are signals, there are ways that we can kind of tell ourselves, hey, something's not quite on track, or whether it's like you were saying, there's these things, the memories, stuff coming through our mind, triggers, things like that. Being able to recognize those and knowing when to say, hey, maybe I should, phone somebody or ask some questions, and just not to have to be alone with it.
yeah.
So.
I think it's asking for help that's the hardest, because when I grew up learning that when you ask for help, people don't help, and basically I grew up with the message that I was a burden and that I was no good, and I carried that message with me for years, and yeah, and when I was like 11, I think that's when I attempted suicide, because I just really believed that I was a burden, that nobody would care if I was gone and stuff like that, and I thought I was ugly and just all these negative things, and yeah, that was my first time. I remember taking a bottle of pills and just swallowing them, and I remember I was hurting, I was depressed, and just there's nobody to talk to, and the people that I reached out to were the ones that basically didn't take me seriously, like community workers that were supposed to listen. And yeah, I was just a kid trying to ask for help, and they didn't even take me seriously. Like, I had cuts on my arms because I used to cut myself, and yeah, and I used to write on the walls too. I used to say that like just how I hated myself and things, and nobody really could help me though, because I was really angry too. Like, not only was I hearing these messages that I was no good, that I was a burden, but I was also telling myself that I hated myself, that everything about me was no good, and I used to really struggle too with just my self-image, just being too skinny. I used to get bullied in school. I used to get teased and hated that, and I used to get every recess I'd get bullied by this kid, and he used to call me Stony Boney and things like that. I used to get so embarrassed, and I'd chase him, try really hard to catch him so I could, I don't know, hurt him, I guess. And but yeah, he was too fast. But we ended up at a boarding home later on, and I don't know, we were different kids then, and I don't know, we just became friends. So anyway, yeah. But
Well, as you're describing, like the triggers and even the writing on the wall and the self-harm type of thing, I think as parents, I know, and I've heard this, children writing notes, different things like that. Some of these things, they're important to watch for in our homes. They're important to signal us to there needs to be more communication or something is amiss.
Yeah, that's
And how can we reach out? And it's hard for, like you said, here you are at 11 years old, you don't know the language to say, this is what's happening to me, and I don't know if it's right or wrong, but this is the message that I'm getting from my brothers and sisters or family members or the situation. And with the family having their own difficulty with addiction, they've got their own, storm going on, and you're just kind of in the midst being pushed aside, and there's nobody really paying attention to what's happening to this life over here.
yeah.
What's happening to this little girl who is at 11 doing things or saying things and reaching out to adults to help, and nobody's getting that
Nobody's listening,
language.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think what triggered that whole thing was the person who molested me wrote me a letter from jail, and he was in there for molesting other kids. And I, on one hand, I was like really happy that this person thought of me to write a letter, because my parents were ignoring each other basically, and my dad was out doing stuff. And there were times when I would try to talk to my mom, but she was like she was off in her own little world, like you said. Like she'd be hungover, or she was just very dismissive of my stuff. Like the only way I could try to communicate with them is to draw stuff and say I love you on that thing, and I would give it to them, and they would say, "That's nice," and then that would be it. I don't know. I felt like I was always that lonely kid who never seen, never included or stuff, and I carried
And
that. So
so prior to, like you're talking about the loneliness, prior to this change up and this, I guess I could call it a rescue almost in your walk, things got really lonely because everybody kind of left you.
yeah, I don't remember how old I was exactly when my mom left my dad. Like, all I remember is that they were having problems, and that just one day she came in the door. She was like inebriated, and she was very angry, and she walked into the room where my dad was sleeping, and she was talking to him in a confrontational way. And a few moments later, he was dragging her out by the hair toward the door. And I remember being terrified, and I ran and I hid under the table, and I grabbed onto that thing, and I was crying, and my dad dragged my mom out the door, and that was it. Like, I could hear her yelling, walking away down the street. Her voice was getting more faint, and the further away she got. And my dad went back to his room and just laid back down, and that was it. Nobody said nothing. My brother stuck his head out the window, or the door of his room, and he didn't say anything. He just looked at them, then he looked at me, and then he kind of slowly closed the door and went back. I guess that was his way of coping, and that was it. I didn't see my mom after that. So I don't remember how old I was.
So when we come back, we are going to discuss with Joanne the transition that takes place at this point in her life and what happens when Jesus enters the picture.